Hi everyone, I'm Paige Abbott, registered psychologist, and today I'm going to talk about the 3 Ds to healing from shame. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, welcome to my latest video. I've decided to tackle some of the core feelings that people tend to struggle with in the context of life and that trickles into the therapeutic space. And today I thought I would tackle the biggest one probably first. So we'll look at shame. And I thought I would break it down to the 3 Ds to healing from shame. Now, I do want to add to that disclaimer that's there at the beginning of the video that obviously this is self-help material. It is not designed to replace any professional support that you may seek out or are currently seeking out. It is designed as a self-help and complementary tool. So if this is an area where you are struggling, I would recommend complementing the self-reflection work that you're doing here with some professional support, because it's just a bit different to get that professional and personal reflection from somebody who gets to know you rather than just doing it all yourself. Now that we have that ground covered, to step into the 3 Ds of healing from shame. I think with the first one, I took some liberties. It actually doesn't start with a D, but it has a D in it, which felt like enough to me. So the first step to healing from shame is to identify it. I know this might sound maybe quite obvious, but for a lot of people, they don't actually realize the extent or the nature of their shame. I've had a lot of clients who would identify coming in not even having any shame, although the way that they talked about themselves and the way that they acted definitely seemed to suggest that there was shame there. So starting to get to identify it. Well, how do we do this if we don't even know that shame exists? I would say by the fact that you're watching this video, there probably is some awareness that perhaps shame is something that's present and potentially impacting you. So as a first step, starting to take some time every day to reflect on how did shame show up for me today? Not if, how. So rather than giving our brains the wiggle room to say, no, shame didn't show up for me today, that's not even a thing that I deal with, let's actually challenge that and cut right to the core. Let's work with the assumption that there is shame present, because there is for most people at most times, but what did it sound like? So getting to know, how does shame talk to me? What are the words that enter my mind, that come out of my mouth when I'm in shame? How do I feel physically when I'm in a spot of shame? Do I notice any physical reactions or sensations in my body that are a clue that shame might be present? For a lot of people, shame lives in the stomach or the solar plexus area. So that's often an epicenter that people will start to feel some sensation and some activity when shame is active for them. You may also start to reflect on, what are the other feelings that are present when I'm in shame? What does the feeling of shame actually feel like for me? Do I notice that it's a heavy feeling? Do I feel kind of sick or nauseous? Do I feel sad? Do I feel angry? What other emotional experiences are connected to that feeling of shame? So really getting to know shame as an entity that allows you to know a little bit more what you're working with so that you can identify it. It's important to be able to identify it for step 2 of healing from shame, which is to draw boundaries. A lot of times when people think about boundaries, we think of external boundaries. So not engaging in certain conversations with other people, not going to certain events, not even having a relationship with somebody who's toxic or not helpful for us. But there's also the important part of internal boundaries. I like to talk about shame almost like an internal bully that we carry with us everywhere that we go. We've all heard that expression, I am my own worst critic. How many of us agree with that? I would think most, because there's so much bullying and so much harm that our brains do to us. It's really a warped thing that you would hope we can move around in life being our own best friend, but usually it's quite the opposite. Our internal thinking and our brain is sometimes working very much against us, not consciously or purposefully. It just has a mission of its own. Drawing boundaries with that part of the brain, once we get to know that entity of shame, how it talks to us, how it leads us to maybe behave, how it feels, once we have some identification of it, then we can start to learn how to, when to, and if to engage with it. And this is the interesting thing, that most things that come from within, we treat with seriousness and we approach it with some regard. So if we have a thought or we have a feeling, most of us believe that that's something we need to take seriously and therefore we need to do something with. The interesting thing about things like shame, and I've talked about this a bit in other videos connected with addiction specifically, is that often our thoughts actually don't have a lot of nutritive value and therefore aren't things that are actionable that we need to pay attention to. So like the bully on the playground, bullies say a lot of things. A lot of it is not stuff that we need to pay attention to or really take seriously. We do sometimes by nature of who it's coming from. So if it's coming from us, we want to take it seriously. But learning how to identify when those thoughts are coming that are not going to be helpful or serve us in any way. And so drawing boundaries can look like, thank you, but no thank you, brain. That doesn't serve me right now. Saying no, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to entertain that. Identifying, this thought doesn't serve me. It's just going to take me down a path of self-deprecation and harm. So I'm choosing to disengage. Drawing boundaries also involves mindfulness. So refocusing back on the here and the now, what we're actually doing that's front and center and ahead of us, rather than getting caught in debating with that thought or arguing with it or figuring out whether it's actionable or not. So drawing boundaries with the shame does tell us where we're at in our relationship with ourselves. For that, it does have value, but a lot of the things that come out of that shame space are actually very harmful and very toxic to our mental and our emotional health. So disengaging with them and detaching is actually often the best course of action. So sometimes the best course of action is inaction, because to engage with it is to fuel it and support it. So we need to take the gas out of that fire of shame that's building within. So once we've identified shame, we can then start to draw some different boundaries, engage with it thoughtfully, disengage with it thoughtfully. The third D to healing from shame is the development of self. Shame robs us of knowing ourselves. It robs us of self-esteem. It robs us of so many core parts of ourselves because we live in these stories and these narratives of who we think we are or who we've been told we are, which isn't necessarily connected to the truth of who we really are. So developing that sense of self, starting to do activities that maybe we haven't done in a long time, maybe exploring new activities that allow us to reflect and develop our sense of values and interests and passion. Also may connect us with other people. People are great mirrors for helping to teach us who we are, what we value, what's important to us. So social connection is part of that self-development. Taking time to work on affirmations, actually changing the story and changing that narrative that's happening within. So moving from that shame speak, which is self-deprecating, that internal bully just putting us down, and moving towards that development of self through affirmations, focusing on what we do well, what we like about ourselves, what we're grateful for within ourselves as well as externally, all help us to develop that sense of self. Having fun helps us develop a sense of self. Following kind of some of our intuition, following some action steps and goals that maybe we've had floating in the back of our minds for a long time, but we just haven't had the confidence or the willingness to act upon. These are all ways to start to develop that sense of self. And as we do, lo and behold, that shame voice further starts to lessen and to quiet. It may never be gone. Shame is a feeling that's there, again, to inform us and tell us where we're currently at in our relationship with ourselves. So when that shame voice pops up, it may be telling us that, maybe I haven't been being as empathetic or as compassionate or as loving with myself as I have been before. Maybe I need to relook at how I'm treating myself and how I'm taking care of myself. So it's helpful. Our goal here is not the elimination of shame. The goal is to learn how to deal with shame in a more helpful way than listening to it and believing it to be true, which is often where people start off in their healing from shame. It also allows us to develop a sense of confidence and self-esteem, to know who we are, to like who we are, and to accept who we are, and to build upon that in our daily life and our daily action. There's so much power to dealing with this feeling of shame. I know it can feel scary and overwhelming as you're getting going because those stories can be so strong. And I've certainly heard from people such strong, such horrible things that they are saying to themselves and about themselves, believing the most horrific things that they're possible of or that they think they could do, thinking that these things are true and that they define them when really they don't. A lot of it is fluff. A lot of it's a story that we do have the power to deal with differently if we're willing to put in some time and some effort. I'm really grateful that you're willing to put in some time and some effort. Even watching this video is a starting point to open up that stronger relationship with yourself. And I hope that you can incorporate this exploration of shame into some of the tools that you may already be using. So you may build it into a conversation with a therapist you're already meeting with. You might start to do some journaling about it. You might reflect on it. You might build it into your meditation or even to a yoga practice that you have. You might think about it while you're exercising, or you might talk about it with a friend. There's so many different ways that we can start that process of change. I gave you the outline of the 3 steps. There's a lot to each of those steps, and you'll need a lot of support along the way. And that's the other thing with shame. We need to put it out there. We need to release these ridiculous things that our brain is telling us about ourselves to somebody else who's safe and that we can trust in an unconditional way in order to find some release and some freedom from that feeling. If we believe these horrible truths about ourselves and we're never willing to put them out there and let them see the sunlight, the light of day, then it's very easy to move forward believing that those are true. If we put them out there and we realize that, wow, that person still likes me, still supports me, still cares about me, isn't that interesting? Maybe actually I'm not so bad. That's the antidote, the starting antidote to the voice of shame. And maybe that's where that journey of developing the self can begin from. There's many different ways to go about this. I encourage you to go about it slowly, gently, and with compassion. In future videos, I would love to keep talking about some other feelings and how to heal from those and work with those in our daily lives. And I would be curious in the comments below what feelings would be of particular interest for you. I have a couple on my mind, but I would really like to hear from you about the feelings you would like me to tackle next in upcoming videos on healing. Take care, look after yourselves as best you can, and bye for now.